Hi, welcome to your number one aviation and tourism TV show, Mamaj TV. My name is Joy Ubebo. Welcome to your number one aviation and tourism TV show, Mamaj TV. My name is Joy Ubebo. Today on our show, we are going to be discussing a very interesting topic: how we can manage flight delays. And we are excited because we have a seasoned aviation professional with us in the studio who is going to really run us through this topic. In the studios with us today, we have Dr. Alex Nwuba. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Alex has a very intimidating profile. If we have to go through it, then we won't have enough time for this program. So we'll just keep it brief. Dr. Alex is the president of Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association in Nigeria. You're welcome to our show.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this break. So today, without wasting time, we'll just dive right into the topic for today: how to manage flight delays, specifically in Nigeria. Now, Doctor, in recent times, we've seen, especially on the social media space, we've seen videos showing passengers destroying properties in the airport, and it's becoming more or less like a regular thing. And the reality is that there will always be flight delays, and flight delays is not something that is just peculiar to Nigeria. It is global. I mean, I have flown with British Airways some years ago from Heathrow Airport. We were supposed to depart by 10 a.m. We had boarded, and then they were trying to close the cargo hold, and they said a pin broke. And then the captain made an announcement and said they were discussing with the aircraft manufacturers to determine if we could still fly. And I was flying with my boss, and the moment I heard that, based on my experience in the industry, the moment I heard the announcement that they were discussing with the manufacturers, I just went to my boss. I said, start putting your things together. This flight is not going anywhere. She was like, how do I know? I said, you wait and see. 20 minutes later, captain came up again over the PA and made the announcement that manufacturers said we couldn't fly. So we had to disembark and wait for another aircraft. Interestingly, we waited and nobody communicated to us. We were just there. After a while, some Nigerians came together. There was a little Aluta group, and few minutes later they came and then they gave us vouchers, £5 vouchers, just to take sandwich and a drink. They did it twice. So the flight did not depart till 6 p.m. on that day. So that was like 10 to 6. That was like 8 hours delay. So delays are not really peculiar to Nigeria. So the reality is that we always have flight delays from time to time. However, the management of these delays is very, very important, which I think is something that I want you to help us look at. How do you think the airlines can manage delays better? Then also, the passengers as well, how do you think they can manage their emotions, how they react to flight delays?
Well, thank you. Very, very complex question. But let's start by saying that in the use of any mechanical device, you cannot have 100% efficiency. There will always be one or two things that happen. The problem in Nigeria is not so much that there are flight delays, but the frequency of flight delays. We are all used to going to the airports, buying our tickets, getting on board. First of all, by the time we start to board the flight, we're already behind the scheduled departure time. So it's not so much equipment related. I remember when I first came on board as the CEO of Associated Airlines, which was one of the airlines I worked with. Our reputation was that the plane only took off when it was full, rather than on the scheduled time. And so that's attitudinal. So we start with attitude. And then how do you fix an attitude where people are used to doing things the wrong way from the beginning simply because it's acceptable? And that's the problem we face in Nigeria, the acceptability of doing things wrong rather than trying to get them right. So let's start from that example. I fixed that by changing the attitude. As Nigerians, further, let me go that further. You have a 4 o'clock appointment and people come at 5 or they come at 6. So that's also attitudinal.
African time.
Yes, we operate under what we call African time. And I can't guess how you can put that on a clock and say that this is how things ought to operate. So we have to start with first the attitudinal challenge. I address the attitudinal challenge by saying, we cannot look to an event that starts at 7 and start to prepare for it at 7. And that's one of the things that happened. So the first thing I did was I created a count back clock, which said that if you had an event at 7, 2 hours to that event, there were certain items that needed to be done. And so if you know and you have a checklist to do that you have to do those things, those at that time, and you don't do it at that time, then I'm able to identify the problem when it occurs, because I can see something that ought to have been done at 5 was done at 5:15, and something that was supposed to be done at 6 was done at 6:30. So already we've started to set in motion delays. And that's why oftentimes, like you see, your 7 p.m. boarding starts at 7 p.m. or 7:05. So that's the first thing, attitudinal. You expressed the challenge of a technical fault, where obviously that flight was meant to depart at a particular time. You were boarded at a particular time ahead of your departure. Another thing was, I should point out, making it specific to Nigeria. We say you must be at the airport 2 hours to departure or 1 hour to departure. But people call me, even till today, 10 minutes to departure, they just got to the airport. Who can I call? And that's because they are VIPs, so they're entitled to that arrangement. Alex, can you call the MD of this airline? I have to be in Abuja, I need to catch that flight. And his expectation is that the whole system will grind to a halt to accommodate his fault. And so if you do that, you delay every other process and delay every other person. We see that quite commonly here. And so on. So our problems are not international. I always say you need to localize the problem to find the solution to the problem. Now, in your technical issue, you hit on a very critical point, which is they said to you, since we cannot solve this problem, let us have an alternate. We'll do a switch of equipment where sometimes there's a piece of equipment on standby, or you reprioritize another piece of equipment that was going to somewhere that you could afford to delay, and you look at your whole sequencing and solve that problem. The challenge in Nigeria is that we seem not to understand the basic laws of business, whereby input equals to output. So if you have airplane problems like you identified, and you already have shortage of aircrafts, and believe me, today we have numbers. We hear this airline has 56 airplanes. You hear the other one has 5. You hear the other one has 26. But when you go and check, there are only 2 flying. Either engine problems, technical problems, personnel problems, money problems, insurance problems. Every problem conceivable exists in our market space. So what happens is that when you face a challenge, you do not have substitute equipment and you do not have substitute plans, because of course, one must always, in your planning, I remember that one of the problems I had a very unique situation. In my business, I was creating new routes. And in creating new routes, for example, I created the route Lagos-Ibadan, Benin, Abuja, Makurdi. 5 steps. And that worked most of the year until Christmas came and all my flights were overbooked. And so the question then became, what do we do about the fact that we have full load to Ibadan, full load to Benin, full load to Abuja, and full load to Makurdi? Okay, the traditional businessman, and that's the traditional mentality here, is if it's full, it's full. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get as many as we can to Ibadan, then as many as we can to Benin, then as many as we can to Abuja, then as many, and you keep adding people at each of these stations. Okay, what I did was quite different. I said, let's replan our schedule, and that's one of the challenges we have with airlines in Nigeria. We have a schedule. We have technical problems, we have airplanes down, we have pilot shortages, we have everything, and nobody bothers to replan. So they hope to manage the situation. So what I typically did was I sent emails. So I would say, okay, I would put new aircraft onto my operation because this is now my peak season, for example, Easter or Christmas. I'll put new aircraft, which means I know the capacity exists because I've opened up my booking engine to support that additional capacity. Now, what I would then do is I would send emails to my customers saying, your 7 a.m. flights to Benin and Abuja have been delayed because we're now flying you direct to those destinations. So you get an email, you don't just come to the airport and then sit down and suddenly you're surprised by the changes in the arrangement. And customers appreciate that. And that brings me back to the question of how do we manage the customer? The problem we have with the customer is we don't communicate with them. We announce that we have an operational delay. What's an operational delay? We have a technical delay, and then everything goes dead. People sit in the departure hall. They came for a plane because they had somewhere they had to get to fast. Otherwise, they'd have gone to a bus stop or taken their personal cars and gone to their destinations. And you hear Nigerians often say that it would have just been better for me to get on a bus. It would have been easier to just drive to my destination than come to this airport and be facing these kinds of challenges. So people fly because they have somewhere to get to on a timely basis in a few hours. They have emergencies. They have medical emergencies. They have legal matters that they must address in emergency. They have all kinds of family emergencies. And they come to the airport. They sit there. Their flight is supposed to depart by 7. By 12 noon, they haven't heard from anybody at the airport. And so you know when there's a vacuum, people start to conjure and imagine all kinds of things. Maybe the plane has carried VIPs to another destination, which is not impossible. We know how it operates. Maybe this or that or the other. The failure to communicate is the leading cause of damage by passengers because we're not telling them what we intend to do, we're failing to communicate to them. But a constant flow of information, which doesn't happen, is necessary, and we know the airlines that are particularly notorious for this. The question is, if we know an airline is notorious for delays and we buy them with the expectations that they'll shape up, why do they meet our expectations by continuously being delayed? If it was an occasional thing, like you talked about your British Airways example, then you would say there was a problem and they addressed it. But when you come every day and the same flight is delayed every day, the same airline delays all their flights. Now, another thing that happens in this particular environment, which I'm attempting to localize it, is we don't have turnaround times. I'm sitting at the airport in Abuja. A flight is coming from Lagos to Abuja going to Jos, for example. It's supposed to arrive in Abuja by 12. It arrives at 12:30. It's already 30 minutes late. They've announced the flights will be, of course, they tell you the flight will arrive in 30 minutes, and the next announcement will arrive in 1 hour. Your flight is delayed for 2 hours. Then eventually it shows up. It's now 2 hours late. It gets to the airport. Okay, they disembark the passengers, they clean the aircraft. You'd expect that because there's already a gap, somebody needs to patch that gap, move the flow much faster. But you then find out that people are acting as if they're perfectly on time. Boarding doesn't start for the next half an hour. That's already 2.5 hours late. So we have management problems. If you look at it across all of these issues, we have, as my friend Captain Michelia said, we have poorly trained, poorly and not very dedicated staff in the aviation industry. And they are the ones causing all these problems, exacerbating already a negative situation and creating these delays that should go away, but they don't. And because the airlines don't get sanctioned, because the air passengers don't demand to get, like, you got a meal ticket. You know, you're sitting at otherwise 6 hours, they haven't even offered you water. Okay, and it's not a big deal because remember, I started with the attitudinal problem. It's not a big deal that you're sitting in that hot. Airports are not cool, though. They're hot space. They don't offer you water. You've passed break lunchtime. Nobody's offered you lunch. Nobody's taking care of. So we have real customer service issues led primarily by poor management.
I hope you found today's topic quite educative and informative. Because of time, we are not going to be able to conclude today. We'll continue on the next show. Until then, thank you for watching. Remember to follow us on all our social media platforms. See you again soon.